Are you ready for Jesse Ventura? Are you ready for conspiracy theories? If the answer is yes, then kiss my dirty ass. Because Jesse Ventura doesn't take orders from slap-jawed faggots like you. That's gay.
So what is gang stalking? The definition changes depending on who you speak to. If you speak to enough people who perceive themselves to be the targets of gang stalking, you will find it can literally be anything. Allow me to explain. Imagine that you are sitting in the library, alone, trying to read a book at a table and enjoy the peace and quiet afternoon. You look up and notice the person sitting at the table across from you sniffle and rub their nose a little bit. You then hear someone in the non-fiction section clear their throat. At the same time, over in the children's book section, you see two children begin arguing over a book that they both want to check out. It seems like a normal day at the library, right? Wrong. In the world of targeted individuals, the scene is very different. The person who rubbed their nose across from you was in fact a Satan-worshipping gang stalker, signaling to the CIA agent in the non-fiction section. The clearing of the throat you heard in the non-fiction section was the agent giving a signal back. The children, who were abducted through human trafficking by the CIA agent and the Satan-worshipping gang stalker who trained them specifically for these types of gang stalking operations, were expecting this cue from the agent to begin their staged argument. The point of all this is that everything was staged to a T to distract you from reading in the library on a seemingly quiet afternoon. So who the hell could be responsible for organizing this? The answers differ wildly again depending on who you talk to. They typically suspect the same exact people who get blamed for every conspiracy: the government, Freemasons, Jews, the Illuminati, reptilians, demons. You know, the usual bullshit. Half the time they don't even care who it is and are quite content just referring to them as they. The reasons why TIs are stalked are usually different too, depending again on who you speak to, but they all mostly have the same narrative. They think they are special for some reason or another, they're chosen if you will, and that almost everyone around them is in on this grand conspiracy and put there specifically to bother them in some way. Think of the agents that were chasing Neo before he took the red pill and realized he was the one. That's what these people are fucking like. Being stalked by one person can often be enough to fuck with someone's head and possibly cause one to suspect more people are involved, but these people take it to an extreme you can't even imagine without ever actually being stalked in the first place. But before we get too deep into this stuff, let me attempt to make some definitions clear here so you will be able to follow what I'm talking about in case you've never heard of any of this shit. TI means targeted individual. This is the label they choose to identify as. When I mention TIs, I'm talking about the people who believe they are being gang stalked. Electronic harassment refers to their belief that exotic weaponry is being used to beam voices into their head called V2K or voice to skull, or that different parts of their body are being stimulated or caused pain by remote weapons that emit electromagnetic frequencies. Some even believe that these weapons can cause them to become sexually aroused for no reason, or that it can cause their nose to run uncontrollably when around women, or even cause your breath to stink when you're around women. When TIs refer to shielding or electronic defense, they are usually talking about anything that they believe can be used to deflect these weapons. They can either buy devices on the internet, usually from companies that specialize in marketing specifically towards the paranoid conspiratard market, or make their own at home, do-it-yourself style. This includes anything from plastering your wall with aluminum foil, which, according to some TIs who had to find out the hard way, causes mold to grow like crazy and could get you evicted from your apartment, to your standard issue aluminum foil hat. Street theater is what the TI claims they go through in public, but it isn't as entertaining as it sounds. They consider almost everything to be street theater. A normal person could just be walking down the street, minding their own business, and not even know that they were in fact being a gang stalker right at that very moment.
Hey, how much do they pay you to walk like that? How do you get gift cards, or do they give you a check? With how you walk, the way you're swinging your arm and your hood's on and your ear plugs in? What's wrong with that? Well, I'm just checking because, you know, there's a gang stalking program going on, and you're certainly fitting the criteria for the people that kind of do it. You're behaving in the same way that there's a group stalking harassment, community harassment program going around. And you're behaving a lot like one of these people, and I was just curious to see if someone just asked you to walk through here. Did they drop you off and say you should come through here at this time because I was driving over here, or if you were getting a gift card or maybe a job promised to you later? Just walking? Okay.
If you were wearing a certain color on a certain day, or driving a certain color car around these people, or even just being out in public at all, you're a part of the street theater, and you are automatically considered a perp, which is another word they use for gang stalkers.
Look, we came to the dollar store and got perped on every vehicle. Nothing but gang stalkers. Perping on us and the children while we're out. Fuck you, gang stalker. Piece of shit.
So why do I feel like you should know about this stuff in the first place? What's my angle with all this shit, you might be asking yourself? Well, I'll tell you. As some of you may know, I used to be a conspiracy theorist, and I never would have heard of any of this shit if it wasn't for the fact that most of these people are conspiracy theorists too. So naturally, this was fascinating to me, and I wanted to look into it. It seems plausible on the surface, given that the government does a lot of surveillance on people for different reasons, and often does fucked up things in the name of keeping the country safe. So I figured proof should be easy to find for the TIs to back up all of their radical claims, because the precedent is already there. I looked at as much targeted individual content as I could stomach to find any proof of this taking place directly in their lives, yet all I ever find is excuses for why there isn't any proof. They seem to believe that the lack of evidence is proof of the conspiracy, and that the burden of proving their claims to be true is on everyone else except themselves. I'm not sure how I'm supposed to believe a person on the internet whom I have never met when they say that they hear voices speaking to them, but the reason that they hear the voices isn't because they are mentally ill, but it's because the government is using an energy weapon to make them hear the voices, and they have to unironically wear a tinfoil hat to stop the voices. It's impossible for me to trust that just on face value alone. I need evidence. I apologize. Speaking of tinfoil hats, there's a link in the description to an MIT study that proves aluminum foil would actually amplify some of these frequencies and would probably make this a lot worse for them if it were actually happening to them at all. My theory is that when they put one of these tinfoil hats on, it has some sort of placebo psychological effect on them where they think that it works. So it helps them to relax and be less paranoid for a little bit. I'm no expert, but from what I have studied over the years, I believe, like all other conspiracy theories, that these delusions can go viral on the internet. There are countless clusters of communities all over the internet pushing and reinforcing these beliefs in people and giving people with psychotic delusions a framework and point of reference to inspire more delusions. Again, just like conspiracy theories, there are people out there who are aware of the gullibility in this market and exploit the fuck out of it for money and attention. Look at Pete Santilli and freedom from covert harassment and surveillance, for instance. Allow me to take a second to read you an excerpt from this article about these targeted individual communities on the internet from the New York Times called Sharing Their Demons on the Web. A link to the full article is in the description as always. Dr. Ralph Hoffman, a psychiatry professor at Yale who studies delusions, said a growing number of his research subjects have told him of visiting mind control websites and finding in them confirmation of their own experiences. The view of these belief systems are like a shark that has to be constantly fed, Dr. Hoffman said. If you don't feed the delusion sooner or later, it will die out or diminish on its own accord. The key thing is that it needs to be repetitively reinforced. That is what these websites do, he says. Similar concerns have arisen about a proliferation of sites that describe how to commit suicide or others that promote anorexia and bulimia, providing detailed instructions on restricting food and photographs of skeletal women meant to be thinspiration. For people who regularly visit and write on these websites about mind control, the idea that others would describe the sites as promoting delusional and psychotic thinking is simply evidence of a cover-up of the truth. So now, the key here that Dr. Hoffman mentioned is that the delusions need to be repetitively reinforced. That's what these TI support groups are doing. And they are unwittingly fucking themselves up even worse than they already were before they ever thought of these groups. A person who might have paranoid schizophrenia who is starting to hear voices could easily Google their symptoms and possibly find himself sucked into this world. If I happened to be hearing voices during the time when I was a huge conspiratard, I could easily be any one of these people. These communities wouldn't really be a danger at all if it weren't for the fact that they often try to stop people from seeking mental help when they clearly fucking need it. They let these beliefs consume their entire lives and sometimes the lives of those around them, even to the point where they take their own lives and those around them. You might remember Aaron Alexis, the perpetrator of the Washington Navy Yard shooting, in which he fatally shot 12 people and wounded 3 others before being shot dead by police. Aaron also identified as a targeted individual, and he believed he was being followed everywhere he went, and that people were literally hiding under his bed even, and that the government was using an electronic weapon to make him hear voices. Lesser known, but more important in the equation, in my opinion, is Myron May. Myron May went into the FSU library and shot 3 people. He also identified as a TI and believed the government was making him hear voices, and he was also a member of the group Targeted Individuals International on Facebook. He made a rather shocking post to the group's page that should have, but did not, set off red flags for everyone because they were too busy encouraging these kind of delusions. He asked, has anyone here ever been encouraged to kill by your handler with a promise of freedom? By handler, he means his government handler that speaks to him using voice-to-skull technology. He was hearing this person in his head. Apparently, not one person in this group thought that the question was an odd one to ask. Soon after this, he sent out various packages to people, and then after conducting his preparations, Myron May went to Florida State University with the intent to kill. He wounded 3 and was killed by the police. One of the people he sent a package to was Renee Pittman Mitchell. She also considers herself to be a targeted individual. Hours before he opened fire at the Florida State University library, Myron May left a desperate voicemail for her saying, "I do not want to die in vain." She said after their initial conversations that she was wary of Myron May and concerned that he might be what she called an imposter and possibly one of the gang stalkers. So instead of getting Myron May the appropriate help he fucking needed, she let her own paranoid delusion that he might be an imposter gang stalker set up by the government or whoever get the better of her judgment. Perhaps she could have prevented this somehow if she didn't assume that he was an imposter rather than a person crying out for help. Included in the package she and 9 others received was a suicide letter. In this letter, he implied that he intended to die and become a martyr for targeted individuals when he said, "Lastly, please whisper a prayer for my soul. I am still a believer and honestly feel there is no hope for me. Consequently, I am making a sacrifice so that others in my same position might have a chance at a normal, harassment-free life. I realize that my methods are not the best selection, and probably will not be perceived as the selection of a Christ follower, but I have prayed incessantly for months to no avail. There are targeted individuals that have endured this torture for decades without any relief, and what targeted individuals need more than anything is media attention." So in his mind, he thought going out and shooting these fucking people was a good thing. After the shooting happened, the TI group he was a member of put up an RIP Myron May page in honor of his sacrifice for them. Some TIs believed that this was a hoax perpetrated by the powers that be to make them look crazy, as if they weren't already doing a fine job of it on their own. Most others, however, look up to him as if he were a hero. They look at Aaron Alexis and Myron May as the Jesus of their cause. Except this conspiracy bullshit wasn't and isn't fucking happening. In Myron's video manifesto, he indicated that he believed the Freemasons were responsible for his stalking and the voices in his head, and as he spoke directly to TIs asking them to not let him die in vain, he spoke calmly and relaxed about going to shoot these innocent people at FSU with the intent that targeted individuals use him as a martyr for their cause and use the blood that was spilled to get attention for themselves. Luckily, nobody died from Myron's attack except for himself, and his death is also unfortunate as well because he could have been fucking helped if it wasn't for these people on the internet that fucked his mind up further than it already was. But he still intended to kill as many people as possible. This is the extreme extent of what these TI groups have to offer. Of course, they aren't all going to go out and kill people, but they still condone some pretty fucked up shit. Today, we have far too many so-called targeted individuals that feed into this monster I've shown you, and some of them apparently believe not enough killing has taken place and that we need more of these people shooting at random people for no fucking reason. If it wasn't for groups like this that actively discourage people with obvious mental illnesses to seek mental help, it's very possible that none of this bullshit would have happened. The reason I'm bringing attention to this at all is so maybe someone who is possibly on the verge of believing in all this crazy shit might reevaluate these beliefs and see how ridiculous all of this is. I also hope other people see this and become aware of what this stuff is about. So in case anyone you know is talking like one of these people, you might be able to give them a reality check before they go overboard and start covering everything in aluminum foil, or worse, become like Aaron and Myron. I know the so-called targeted individuals that are watching this and conspiratards in general probably think I'm a terrible person and that I'm probably paid by the government to make this video or possessed by some demon to do this, but all I am is just a dude on the internet who really wants to see you drop this shit and get better. Don't just listen to me either. Look into this stuff for yourself and research both sides of this argument and draw your own conclusions, please. And not just about this particular subject. I mean, this is some shit you guys should be fucking doing anyway. But that's all I really have to say about this for now. If I make another video on this subject like this, I'll fucking make one. But anyways, I'll see you folks in the rabbit hole.